The next question is about, we've touched on it in some ways already, but about how you applied your volunteer, academic, or professional experience, and what insights and learnings that you got from that. Betsy wants to go.
I'll take it. Since you know, I grew up in a very dysfunctional family, and that has greatly helped me in Haiti because Haiti is a completely dysfunctional country. And that suffers from a myriad of psychosocial obstacles and has a very tortured history. So that was very helpful. I studied theology, which led me into a marketing and advertising career, and that's always very interesting, but Old Testament theology particularly is a very fascinating story and history of a people as they journey and are looking and seeking promise and fulfillment. And that's highly applicable when you go into marketing and advertising. Marketing and advertising is also very helpful to me in what I do in Haiti because I do take a marketing and advertising approach. I don't view myself essentially as working in international development. I see that I have a client that is in international development. And my job is to really market and present how it is that we respond to a country where there's differences on every level in a way that is appropriate and respectful. So when you do that, when you have a client like that, your job is to have a very thorough understanding of who they are, what they want, what their vision is, what their challenges are. And I think that is critical advice to give to anybody who wants to work in a foreign country. Shut up and listen for about 5 years and then figure out if you have something to offer.
Yeah, well, and we'll just go across the room if you guys are comfortable with that. Although you triggered something that I would have never even thought to mention. My aunt was June Callwood. So having a named person in your family, the old people recognize it. Google it. Yeah. But what's relevant is when Lantana Nonprofit Homes ended because it had no more funding, I talked to her and she told me to phone Stephen Lewis, who I phoned. And he was beneficial to one extent because I was trying to decide whether to go into international development work or continue to do the work that I was doing in Canada. And he advised me to continue doing the work that I would do in Canada. And that turned out to be very good advice because despite 10 years of experience, it was not relevant, useful experience because it was working with heavily subsidized government programs. So there are groups from Canada who are going abroad trying to get them to do heavily subsidized government programs and achieving 12 units a year, 14 units a year. So the impact is very minor. After 10 years at Options for Homes, I had something to offer, which was how to do housing without government assistance. And even then, we were wise enough to realize that if you go to another country as an expert, you're really just proving you're an idiot. So if it's exactly the same comment you just heard. It's actually, in my opinion, as an adult, impossible to go to another culture and become adept and comfortable with that culture. So Options' principle is we will only work with people born, raised, and educated in the country we go to. And so we go first as students, no matter what your age is, and then you can start to add ideas, but for Pete's sakes, don't think they're good ideas. Just think they're ideas that will stimulate conversation. Because I spent some time in Mexico with somebody that was trying to solve a specific problem. I'd give him an idea and he'd say, oh, you're not from Mexico, are you? And that went on for about 4 or 5 ideas, and then I hit something that got him very excited, and at the end of a half-hour conversation, he had something that was useful. So humility in terms of traveling is something that's incredibly important. And going there to help generate activity. The thing that's been amazing me is we have this saying that we use, don't give a man a fish, but teach him how to fish. Why would we continuously give them money when we could teach them how to make money? And we actually do have the knowledge as how to show them how to do that, but we don't choose to share because most of the entrepreneurs are trying to keep that secret so they can make money on the backs of those individuals they're trying to work with, which is why we have such bad experiences internationally. You know what my definition for corruption is? The locals teaching rich foreigners are not so smart. That's basically the heart and soul of corruption, because I've faced more commissions demanded in Canada than I ever face internationally. And I think it's so important for us to leave our moral attitudes behind and sit down and listen and learn from the people that we're going to be with. And so I would support what she just said.
One of the things, I'm just going to interject before they speak, but I think, you know, we're in a different era now. So I started my undergrad 25 years ago. It's a very different moment. Right now, in January, the world has taken on a new global agenda for sustainable development. Not perfect, lots of questions about whether it will be effective or not, but the key and most important thing about it is that agenda was globally developed and is universal. So it applies equally to Canada as it does to Botswana. So I think that it's important also when we're thinking about how does our volunteer academic professional experience, how does it impact our professional journey, especially when we're in the domain of thinking about how we're going to engage in work in social justice or in poverty reduction or in cooperation, is that it's not always about going somewhere anymore. So I just want to make sure we're in that headspace because I think that programs are changed quite a bit now and that this is our new global reality.
I think what I would like to talk about for this particular question is my volunteer experience. My academic experience, while it towards the latter half of my academic experience did impact quite a bit on my professional journey, I think my volunteer experience had a much more significant impact. So as I mentioned earlier, I initially volunteered with Canada World Youth, and then I volunteered with Canadian Crossroads International, who is now known as just Crossroads International. And it was that particular experience which was the most impactful for me. I moved to Togo in West Africa. I lived in a rural village with a host family. I had to learn how to do everything from scratch, from washing my clothes to bathing myself. I worked with a small microfinance organization there, helping them expand their programming from just microfinance, village savings and loans into HIV/AIDS programming, because they were finding a lot of people in their community were dying of AIDS and not able to continue the savings and loans aspect that they had been working on. And this experience opened a whole new reality for me. And I think something that John said was very important. You get to understand the perspectives and the points of view of the people with whom you're working. And that's the most important thing of living overseas. Not what you learn, not the experiences that you gain, but the perspectives that you begin to understand. And that's what I took with me when I came back to Canada, and I was able to apply that understanding into actual programming work in Canada, and it helped improve my ability to design projects and design proposals. After that, I did another volunteering stint with VSO, who's now known as CUSO. Everyone's changing their names. But I moved to Cameroon, and I worked with an AIDS service organization in the far north region of Cameroon, which is a very conservative area. And I did that for a good period of time, too. And only after that did I go into doing a master's degree in international public health. And I think one of the key messages that I try and share everywhere I go is doing a master's degree without having any work experience is fine, but I found for me, I was able to gain much more out of my degree after having had the actual work experience, the volunteer experience, living in 2 different countries, working with 2 different sets of communities, working on a variety of challenges. It really enriched my my master's degree. It helped me contribute a lot more, and it helped me understand a lot more of what I was studying. The other aspect of volunteering that I would like to touch on as well is my volunteer work with OCIC. I've been on the board now for almost 6 years. And when I first joined, I had no idea what I was doing. I had no idea what was going on. And I feel like I've come a long way now. But when I joined OCIC, I had just moved back to Canada from living in Australia for a few years after having done my master's there. And I found it an amazing opportunity to reconnect with the sector in Canada, in Ontario specifically. It enabled me to really get to know the key players in the sector, all the small to medium-sized organizations, the large organizations, really come to understand what was happening with CEDA/DFAT/Global Affairs. So it really enabled me to develop a much stronger understanding of things like strategic planning, long-term mission planning, and at the same time, I also started working at Plan, and the interesting thing about working at a very large organization is you're a bit isolated from what's happening in the overall sector. But having my connection to OCIC helped me to keep my finger on the pulse of what was happening in the sector, what was happening with funding for small to medium organizations, and how everything was changing and evolving.
Okay. Yeah, so my volunteer experiences. I guess when I was going through university doing my undergrad, I stopped twice. Once to do Canada World Youth, and that was to do volunteer work in Canada as well as in Costa Rica. And then again when I did my placement. So I never studied more than 2 years in a row. And similar to your experience, where I felt those experiences helped my study and made the case studies and the theory that we were studying in the undergrad, the BA program I did at U of T, made it more rich and alive, and I could relate to abstract ideas in an easier way. So I felt, for me personally, that I needed those experiences particularly overseas, to reinforce what we were studying in the context of what was going on in the world. When I finished my degree, I went back to the DR for 10 years, and I did a variety of jobs. And so I guess it was just learning on the job, and that's the way I learn best. I'm not an academic. I had no aspirations to go back and get a master's or a PhD, but I did want to learn. And sort of I had a little thing in my head that I say, well, 4 years and then I'm going to move on. And just that and it worked. Some cases it worked out that way, and but after 4 years it was like, this is as much as I'm going to learn from this particular job, and it's time to move on. And it was healthy for just to feel that you weren't stuck in a job, and that you couldn't change. So I still feel that way now, even though it's where I am now, it's been 8 years, but I think I'm feeling okay, I've learned everything I can do, and I want to learn something new, a new challenge. It's time to move on. So everywhere I go, you pick up some skills, you pick up some abilities, in different contexts, in different countries, you understand the reality. So just from the variety of jobs that I've had over the years, and doing some specific training that you need to help with some skills. Kim was saying earlier, after you get an undergrad, a BA or a BSc, what do you really know? Not too much in terms of a practical skill, but you get that on the job. But also there's lots of specific training. So I took a course a couple of years ago on monitoring and evaluation. It's a useful skill to have. It doesn't require a big time commitment. It was a 1-week course, and some practical skills. And it's a great way for networking, and you connect to the wider community. If you're going to be working in an NGO in Canada now, you're going to have to learn what's RBM logic model. Something you can go and study a course for a week, but then it's really hands-on, using it, applying it, making mistakes, talking to colleagues, people that you know from other organizations. So those are some concrete skills that you're going to need to know. You're going to have to know how to write reports. I hate writing reports. That's not my forte. I'm much more comfortable with numbers. So, but if you're not comfortable with numbers, you're going to have to be comfortable with budgets, financial reports, those types of things. So those for me, how I learned those skills, how I developed them, refine them, make mistakes, but through the variety of different jobs and walks of life that I've done, some as volunteer work over the years, some as paid employment, some as courses, and from your colleagues that you will meet and share experiences.
It looks like there's people in the room who like RBM. There's a whole row of people who are nodding and smiling. It's interesting how the shift towards the funding requirements or the need to communicate to people what impact you're having is really shifting how we see this kind of work, which can be a good thing. I just want to give one insight or lesson learned for me has been to collaborate. The most learning and the most fun that I have is doing things in collaboration. So while it is certainly myself, the person who has to do my job or my work, I don't see my work as mine. I certainly see, and it might be the nature of the kind of work, but working as a council, we're a community. And the council is not about an office who delivers something to the membership. People don't pay us membership fees to give them a product. We together form the council. So I think that that's what I have the most insight and learning from in the years that I've worked in OCIC, but in other jobs as well, is that the most collaboration and appetite and willingness to really reflect and share what works and what doesn't work in a deep way is actually the space where you can do some kind of real transformative work, and that you can build a community together, that it's not somebody who gets responsibility for that, it's a collective effort. So those are some of the kind of insights that I've had in my own journeys here or there, whatever they are, is that doing it together is stronger for me.